Dina from Tarot with Dina. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Today we are looking at my Lenormand collection. So a couple of years ago I wanted to get into Lenormand, and I didn't just buy a deck like a normal person would. I bought, I don't know, several decks, more decks than anybody should. And some of them turned out to be really helpful to beginners. Others made it a little bit difficult to learn. So I'm going to be showing you all of the decks that I have that are Lenormand and sort of showing you the features that they have and what makes them a good deck or not for beginners. I mean, if you know how to read the decks really well, it doesn't matter. You can read any of them. But for beginners, there are certain things you're going to want to look for. So the first deck that I have laid out here is called the Old Style Lenormand, and it's from, I think, Los Scarabeo. Oh, it's from US Games, actually. This one is US Games. Okay, so the cards are a good size because this deck is usually used in a grand tableau. You have all of the cards laid out, so you want them to be small enough that you can actually see what's going on. So for reference, this is a playing card, just standard bicycle card, and these cards are ever so slightly narrower and ever so slightly a little bit taller. So they're about playing card size, which is a really good size for one of these decks. They're numbered, so each card has a house, and that's what the numbers are for. So these are in the order that the houses are. Having them numbered can be helpful. There's a playing card insert, or inset? Playing card inset. Not every deck has it. It's just some helpful information. And also, I went through and kind of used them as flashcards and then taught myself to read it. If I just didn't have the Lenormand deck, I could read it with the playing cards because I learned the insets. It's a useful thing to have. Another thing I like on this one is that it has the name of the card and you can read what it is clearly. So I've noticed for myself that when I look at the cards, it seems like maybe I just love to read, but I see the word first before I even look at the image. So for me, having the words on them helps me a lot. A lot of people, maybe they just read the image, but I find having the word helps. With this deck, it's a good size. It has the numbers, it has the playing cards, it's clearly labeled. All of the images are clearly distinguishable from each other, which is another important thing when you're looking at all of the cards laid out. You want to be able to tell exactly what you're looking at right away. So this Old Style Lenormand, I think, is a perfect deck for beginners. In fact, if there's only one thing that I just wasn't super crazy about with it, it's that for some reason it has the title of the deck on the backs, which I don't know, it bothers me a little bit. But the deck is about as close to perfect as one of these decks can get. So that's just a minor quibble, and really this would be a great deck for someone to learn. So that was Old Style Lenormand. Okay, so the second deck that I'm going to show you is the Grand Tableau Lenormand deck from Los Scarabeo. This deck is probably my very first choice for fantastic Lenormand deck. It's a good size. It is actually a little bit smaller than a playing card. So when you lay them all out, you're going to be able to see and read the entire spread. It does have like a little symbol here. Like, I think it is a reproduction of an antique deck, and that's probably the trademark from the original company. Here, oh, it's a Patnick deck. It's probably a reproduction of a European deck, and it has like the sort of old-timey European illustration style on it. It does have the playing card insets. It has the numbers, and most of the pictures are clearly distinguishable from each other. Every once in a while, you look at some of the illustrations, like you might not realize that's supposed to be a bear or a fox. I don't know. Sometimes some of the old-timey illustrations, the animals are like a little bit harder to distinguish. It's just maybe the style that they're drawn in. Now, this deck did not have the words, and I actually wrote with like a really thin Sharpie because I did prefer to have the words. So I don't know why I need those, and I guess probably I spend way too much time reading, and you probably don't need the words to be able to recognize a book or a ring or a heart. But I did write the words in Sharpie because I just like having them. So I think this probably, if you don't mind writing on it with a Sharpie, which I don't think looks bad at all, or maybe you don't need that, but I think this is probably my first choice for a great Lenormand deck. And the backs of this one, I also really, really like. They have like an antique sort of design that I think is really pretty. So this one is Grand Tableau, and it's really a toss-up. These two decks are like the probably best decks to learn with if you're new. I do have just a slight preference for this one just because I do like the backs better. But this is another just really fantastic deck to learn with, and you can spread them all out and see all of them when you're doing a reading. Okay, this third one is the Lenormand Oracle by Lo Scarabeo. And it is a bigger deck. I think I wrote on this one, oh no, I wrote a lot on this one. So probably that's not what you would be doing with your deck. I don't know what possessed me to write. I think I have adjectives here, nouns here. I must have read a book or a website that told me that I had to learn those. You can see these are bigger. So if I were to lay out 9 or even 8, it's going to start taking up a lot of room. As I come this way, I'm not going to fit 4 rows, or I could if I like to like stand up and look at the whole table, but just sitting and reading easily, this is a deck that is going to be big for that. Here's a playing card. So it is quite a bit larger, but a lot of times when someone is learning, they're not going to be starting out laying down 36 cards anyway. So if you just wanted a deck to start out with, maybe you want to learn to read 3 cards at a time, and then maybe 2 rows of 3 cards at a time. And this would be great for that. It didn't have the names of the cards, so I did write with a little Sharpie what the cards were. And here's another example of like these animals. Like, I do not believe the illustrator ever saw a fox, but okay, you know, it's the style. It is the style of illustration. But I did write the names of the cards, and like I said, I wrote some adjectives, some nouns, just to help me study. It does have the playing card insets, the numbers, you know, I wrote the names. I mean, it's a decent deck. The backs look like this. Obviously, I got some use out of it because I did write on it and practice by laying out the cards. So you would read, like, here you have adjectives, they would modify the card before them. So you'd have like sudden, dangerous, definitive, decisive would modify like a gift or whatever. Lenormand Oracle, it's decent for beginners. Someone could learn with it. It's probably too big to lay out 36 cards, but that's probably the only thing that would stop you from using this deck. And if you're starting out, you're probably looking at 3 cards. People do 3 card spreads for quite some time. Okay, the next deck is the cute little Lenormand by Sarah M. Lyons. This is a fantastic deck to start with. It comes with a hardcover book that's in full color. And on her website, she has little stickers you could actually print and use in your journal, so you could record your spreads just by going to her website and printing the stickers. It is really cute. So for each card, she has like themes, overview, how to read it in a spread, combinations with other cards, some questions. The only thing that is a little weird about this is that somehow you're supposed to fit the cards back in this envelope, which was not working for me. So I took an old bag that I had from Tarot Totes that I got years and years ago, and I put the cards in here because stuffing them in and out of that envelope all the time was just not working for me. But these are also just about the same size, slightly larger than a playing card. But these ones are, in my opinion, just especially adorable. The illustrations are really simple and clear, very easy to see at a glance what you're looking at. And I really like just the pinks and blues, very cheerful. very, sort of modern and upbeat. I prefer this illustration style over, the Lenormand cards, they're a traditional deck, and some of them originate in France and others in like Germany. So there's that whole history there. Just my preference as an art style is that I like this modern, cute look with the updated colors. I'm gonna try to move these forward some more, because one thing this has that's different, I'm messing the whole thing up, but one thing this has that's different than a standard deck is that instead of having a man and a woman for cards 28 and 29, it has the querent and the partner. So that is a change that was made in this deck. So it makes it more neutral. Not everybody is going to be, a lot of times relationship readings are what people come for, but you're looking at a man and a woman, maybe their partner isn't, maybe they're non-binary, maybe any number of things. So having the querent and the partner means that you could use the deck with any variety of situations rather than just, some of the decks are very heteronormative. So that is an update that some people might really appreciate. And I think this is just a really sweet little deck. This is the Mystical Lenormand deck. Now this one, okay, it also has a really nice book. However, it's not sold together. So when I ordered this, I thought I was ordering this. I actually ordered a paperback book and it didn't have a deck with it. So that was, a little bit confusing to me. You can see how similar the covers are. So when I saw this on Amazon, I ordered this. It's a full color book. It's nice, no deck. So then I had to order the deck separately. If I had just probably read what I was ordering better, I would have noted that, but I didn't. So I got the book like a couple days ahead of time and then got the deck. But it is a pretty decent book. It has all these card combinations and everything. So this one is also small. So with a playing card, it is smaller than a playing card. The images are a little bit busier. And so here for the clover, there are also ladybugs. There's all this other stuff in the imagery. So when you already know what the cards are, you're not gonna have any confusion. So you see this, you know that that's a snake. You don't think, what is that, an egg? But when you're first learning and you don't know what everything is yet, you have a man here. This is the whip. A man self-flagellating or whatever. It has sort of an oddly Christian theme to it. I'm not sure where they were going with that exactly, because it's only in some of the cards and on the backs, but it doesn't. Here you have an Egyptian sarcophagus for the coffin. So I'm not really sure what the concept was there. But they're very pretty cards, but there is a lot more going on in the imagery. So here you have, I think this is garden. I did not write on this one, and the numbers are there. Like on this one, it's much easier to see the number 23 than the number 14. Some of the numbers are a little bit difficult to see. It looks like there's also some astrological information, and I'm not really sure why. I have not used astrological information when I was reading the cards. Oh, this one's especially pretty. Some of them are really pretty cards. Here's another one. It has like an egg and a dragon, but this is the key. So once you learn what is or isn't a card, there's only 36 in a standard deck. So once you learn that dragon isn't one of them, egg isn't one of them, shepherd isn't one of them, camel isn't. So then you're gonna know right away, this is the sun, this is the moon, this is the key. So it won't be confusing. It's just when you're first seeing them for the first time and you're like, so what is this, like climbing with your Sherpa or whatever's going on here? There's a lot of dragons actually. This woman in the tower has some dragons around her.
So that's the Game of Thrones.
It's the Game of Thrones. Yeah, so it's the Mystical Lenormand. It's one of the ones where you're veering toward it's more pretty, but you start to have possible confusion while you're learning. Like here, you have the ring. There's also birds. Like it looks like maybe the bird is the focal point at first, but it's actually the ring. You have Adam and Eve, I guess, in a garden here with the lion and the lamb, or that might be a unicorn, but it's the heart. So this one's the mystical Lenormand. It's pretty, it's a good size. You know, it does not have the names of what the cards are. Next we have Under the Roses. And this has a couple of extra cards, which is nice. So the size of these is just a little bit narrower and the same height as a playing card. So again, it's a good size to lay out the cards. Instead of the playing card insets, it has just a little key. So it's not a picture of the playing card, but it will have like K heart. So you know that that's the King of Hearts.
No, it's the rapper K Heart.
It might be. But I'm thinking King of Hearts. And this one, it looks like I guess I didn't want to get confused with the way other decks do it. So when it says the grave, I wrote coffin in Sharpie. When it says the sickle, I wrote scythe, because probably the books that I was reading at the time had that. And for, you know, the owls, I wrote birds. Although some decks have owls, some have birds, and some have more than one, and it can mean different things. Now here's an example of a card where there's more than one option. So for the child, there are two different races available, and that's also the case for the man and woman. So they're all the way back here at 28 and 29. So with this deck, one thing you could do is, obviously you could switch out the cards. If the person that you were reading for, you know, identified like more with one race or another, then you switch it out that way. But you could also switch it out, like if you're reading for someone who identifies as female but has a female partner, or same thing with male. So you have a couple of different options. So I like that this one has a couple of different race options, and also the option that you could use more than one male card, more than one female card. That's one thing about the older ones, is that there is a very heteronormative assumption about who you're reading for, usually a woman, and usually she's looking for a man. Some of the older decks are very strict about that, but I mean, this looks very traditional in a lot of ways, but it does have that update. Now on this one, the snake is also a picture of a woman. Sometimes the way people read the card, the snake, is that it's like a woman. Maybe she's after your man or something. So in this one, they illustrated the snake as a woman. It can be confusing. It's not, because it says the snake, but sometimes when they start changing the illustrations, that can be confusing, but I think because it has the great big word snake, it's not going to confuse anybody. I think it's especially pretty. For some reason, that kind of reminds me of like vampires or something. It's not like a vampire themed deck, but the roses remind me of that in a way. It does tell you what the playing cards would be. You know, they're numbered, they have the words on them, they have some different options for the ones that represent people. So I would say this is successful as a beginner's deck that somebody could learn with. So this is Ciro Marchetti's Gilded Reverie Lenormand, and it says expanded edition. This has some extra cards that Ciro came up with. If you're familiar with his artwork at all, you know, you will like this. If you like his artwork already, you will like this. It has gilding, and the cards are bigger than a playing card, but not so big that you can't use them if you wanted to lay out a bunch of them. They do have the numbers, and they have, you know, just like 7 heart. So it doesn't have a picture of a playing card, but it does tell you which playing card it corresponds to. The art style speaks for itself. Like, he's renowned in this style of art. Some people like it, some people don't. The people who like it are going to love this deck, and the people who don't, you know, probably aren't going to give it a second look. This doggy is just the sweetest dog, probably of like any Lenormand deck. That is like the sweetest doggy. but they are starting to get too big. So I've got 8 across instead of 9. There's no way I'm going to get 4, let alone 5 rows for the extra 4 cards. They're just not going to fit. So they're bigger. They not huge, but bigger. You could do a 9 card spread easily. Like, here's 9 cards, no problem, you know, so 3, 6, 9, you know, but 36 probably is too many. There are some options. There's like a man and like sexier man. A woman.
A man and Fabio.
It's like the man and then the man with his robe open, like the woman and the woman.
Mickey.
Yeah. So for the man and woman, there's more than one option. So you could use that however you wanted to use that. And then there are extra cards at the end. But again, they are not labeled with words. So you would have to read the book, or you're just going to be, well, that's probably dice, but some of them you might not know what it is. I don't use extra cards because, I don't know, everyone comes up with their own extra cards if they make extras, and then you have to learn their system. And I think there's an app. Well, I know there's an app for this one, but I think it doesn't have the extra cards. I think the app only has the 36 cards. So even in there, you're not learning. I might be wrong, but I do think the app only has the 36 cards. I mean, I know that clearly he went through some effort to create like 8 more cards, and you might like to use them and you might actually get a lot out of them. Maybe they were something that added a lot that I'm missing out on by not using them. But for me, I don't like this kind of extra card, but I do like extra options for the men and women, although I'm not sure why in this case the extra options are like they're now getting undressed or whatever. But this one is Gilded Reverie.
It's for love and romance questions.
I think it might be. Yeah.
Does Fabio still want to date me?
Well... This one is called Pixie's Astounding Lenormand, and it comes in a tin. So what the artist did here was he looked through Pamela Coleman Smith's artwork. She's the artist behind the Rider-Waite tarot deck. He looked through her artwork and found imagery to use in a Lenormand deck, which is sort of an interesting concept. So the artwork itself is going to be familiar. The style is going to be very similar to a Rider-Waite style. I don't know, I probably should have read the instructions. It probably tells where he found all the artwork for the rider. That's the way the horse is looking over his shoulder and stuff. It's all very familiar. It's one that has, you know, 9 clubs instead of a playing card inset with a 9 of clubs. And it is numbered, but I hate Roman numerals like so much. Like Roman numerals just mess up my dyslexia or something. So I put my own numbers with a little Sharpie in the corner. And probably you won't have to do that. You know, most people are not going to have trouble with Roman numerals, but it's like, for me, if I see the number, I never get confused when I see a number. Well, balancing my checkbook might say otherwise. Usually I think I don't get confused when I see a number, but when I see the letters for the Roman numerals, I'm like XXVII. I don't instantly read it as a number the same way I do. So that's why mine has Sharpie written in the corner. And you probably won't need that. And here the sun is very familiar. If you use the Rider-Waite deck, you know, that imagery is very familiar.
It appears that a lot of these are like prototype drawings or like concept drawings.
Yeah, they could be.
Because like the rainbow, you got the family or something like that has arms up. Tower.
Like here,
this could have been
an
ace.
Yeah, that has a similar feeling to an ace, or like the house.
Ace of Cups.
I think is like, it looks like the house in the 6 of Cups. It looks like the house that's in the background with the children in the foreground.
Yeah.
So it probably says, there is a little booklet, okay? And the booklet is kind of thick, like I read it, but I just don't remember all of the details about how they came up with finding the artwork. But I don't know why this one just never really clicked with me. It has the names of the cards. They're a good size. Did I already show how they compare to the playing card? I don't know if I did, but they're a little bit smaller than a playing card. The backs have a nice little simple rose design. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing that really stands out and makes me choose it. I guess the main reason someone would like it is if they wanted to use it alongside their Rider-Waite tarot deck. But I mean, I never reach for this one. It just doesn't, there's nothing at all wrong with it, but there's nothing that stands out. The coffin too, this kind of like reminds me of the Four of Swords or whatever. But I haven't really used this one. Probably if I hadn't written on it in Sharpie, probably I would sell it or something. But there's nothing wrong with it. And if you like it, then you would know if you like the art style and if you don't. So if you like it, you'll like it. And if you don't, there's no reason to get it.
So quickly, I was reading the little book.
If only I would read the little book, I would have more information.
This says in this short little bit, I didn't read the whole story, but it says, the premise was that 3 friends using a spirit board contacted the spirit of Pamela Coleman Smith, who suggested that they search for the rest of the deck. The story worked like magic and people began to be interested. Over the course of several weeks, quote, Princess, end quote, 93, end quote, and myself, as the narrator, found the cards, gave commentary on how to use the system, and met new friends along the way. So apparently they
someone posting online
found some cards, and they're like friends named Princess 93 and whoever this person, Edmund, and contacted Spiritly Pamela Coleman Smith.
But where did they get the drawings from? Are they from her artworks, or do they redraw it themselves?
After several conversations with U.S. Game Systems regarding the copyright of the original card images, permissions was granted for the Pixies Lenormand to move forward. So they contacted U.S. Games and used their images.
All right. And they also got published by U.S. Games. Oh, I think I just clunked that right on the table.
So, go back. But read the book.
Pixies is sounding Lenormand. I never read the book. Why don't I read the book? Why? Another one that comes in a tin and is also from U.S. Games is the Fairy Tale Lenormand. And it says written by Arwen Lynch, which, you know, a lot of people know her. She's online a lot in tarot. She's big. Artwork by Lisa Hunt, who also has illustrated so many decks. This kind of thing is like right up my alley as far as fairy tales and Lisa Hunt's artwork. Now the cards are a little bit busy. There's a lot going on, but they do have the names. So they're clearly numbered. They're a decent size. It's a little smaller than a playing card. And they have no playing card inset, but it does tell you what it corresponds to. And there is an app. I don't always use the app, but I do like to have them sometimes. I really especially like the bear. So, I mean, the imagery is from fairy tales, and it's not always, without the words, it might not be clear, you know, what it is exactly that you're supposed to be looking at. But luckily it does have the words. So here, you know, you have some children in a garden, but it says garden, so you're not going to be like, wait, is this the child card? But this is the child card. So they are labeled and you can tell what they're supposed to be. This one also has some extra cards. So for gentlemen, there's 2 different, and for lady, there's 2 different ones. A lot of times when there is a variation, it is with the man and woman cards, because that's probably the biggest area where the traditional heteronormative Lenormand doesn't work for everybody that you might be giving a reading to, or even for yourself. That's a pretty common place to put the extra cards. It doesn't have like extra, like the Gilded Reverie Lenormand, like extra cards beyond that. It just has an extra gentleman and an extra lady. And the backs are like if you're unlocking a little key to your fairy tale land or whatever. With this one, the art is just especially pretty, and it is clearly labeled. You know, really when I was first learning, I wasn't pulling it out that much because the artwork was still kind of busy for me. So even with the words on there, I just found it just a little bit confusing at first. But then, you know, once you learn, like here it says scythe, so you know that that's what you're supposed to be looking at. But it looks like there's a lot going on in the scene beyond that. So I just found that part confusing. But once you know what the cards are, then you're always going to know what the cards are. No matter what deck you have, you lay them out, you know what they are, and it's not going to be a problem for you at all. So this one was Fairy Tale Lenormand. I'll try not to clang that too much. The Dreaming Way Lenormand is probably one of my favorites as far as the pictures themselves. In fact, I liked it so much that I got the Dreaming Way Tarot, and it didn't have the same sort of surrealism. So I was a little bit sadly disappointed. I hoped it would have the same sort of feel with the whimsical illustrations. The thing about Lenormand is that the cards always mean the same thing. Like with tarot, the cards are going to mean something different with a different illustration. So for snake, the snake is wrapped around the woman. You're not going to read anything into that as far as part of your interpretation. Or here with a coffin, someone in like a little sardine can. It's not that they have nothing to do with what the card means, but they aren't interpreted the same way as like with tarot, where you might read into like, well, why does this bird have a birdhouse on its head or whatever? Like it doesn't change the meaning. So the whimsical illustrations just sort of stand on their own. Like with a bear, you know, it looks like someone wearing a mask, but you're not going to interpret it. Why is that person wearing a mask? You're just going to interpret it the way bear is interpreted. So it's whimsical, but it doesn't have like wild whimsical meanings. It just has the standard meanings. It doesn't have the playing card insets, but it does have, like for mountain, there's a little symbol meaning 8 of clubs. The cards are numbered and they are also labeled with the words, which I do find helpful. And the size, I really like the ring. The size is exactly the same size as a playing card. So you can lay out a whole bunch of cards. And they're just the standard 36 cards. I laid them out in groups of 8 instead of 9, so I have 4 left over that would be all the way down, you know, but I could have laid them out 9 across and then they would all fit. So they, you know, they're the size where you can see them all. A very sweet deck. The backs, this sort of remind me of like a Taylor Swift video or something about it that gives that quality. This is the Dreaming Way, and I do think the illustrations are probably my favorite of all of the Lenormand decks. If I were to only have one, and maybe I should pare down my collection, but if I were to only have one, I would probably use this one because it's a good size, it has all of the things it needs to have, and I think it's adorable. The Celtic Lenormand is actually, it has artwork by Will Worthington, who illustrated the Druidcraft Tarot, which is one of my favorite tarots. So I already knew I was going to like the artwork in this one. I did find it a little hard to learn the meanings at first though, because the illustrations vary quite a bit and there are several extra cards. It's narrower. It's the same height as a playing card, but it is narrower. And these are some extra interpretations of cards. So instead of just an extra man and woman that a lot of decks have, there are extra types of birds. There's a cat if you don't like the dog. There's an extra child and rider if you want them to be male or female. So for birds, we have the chickens here, we have owls, and there's also songbirds. Here's the other child. So you have a boy child and a girl child. You have a regular snake and a snake that's shedding its skin. Here you have the dog or the cat. The backs just have this sort of Celtic knotwork pattern. I think these are really pretty. Here's the songbirds. So for the birds, you have 3 options. You have a couple different trees too. Here's the other tree. So you could change out the tree with the seasons. There are numbers, but no words. And again, I didn't write on these ones. Like sometimes if there was a place on cards for me to write the words, I did, but where the illustration fills the whole frame and there's no real place to write it, I just didn't write on them. So sometimes like here, this looks like people shaking hands or something like that, you know, but it's actually supposed to be a ring. There is a ring on someone's hand, but it's not clear. When you're just first starting out, it's not clear what that is. This one is supposed to be a heart. So there is a heart there, but it also looks like it's a beach or the seaside or whatever. Sometimes it's not clear, especially since they're Celtic designs or pseudo-Celtic designs. Here's some other ones. You know, the sun and moon look like they could just be a beach or something. But like some of the times where it's not, like for garden, this is just like a field of wildflowers. Or is that garden or? See, I mean, I think it's bouquet. There's no words on it. And I think that these are really pretty. But the reason I say that they're not great for beginners is because I think this one is coffin, but since it is different than a standard coffin and it is not labeled, that's the part that makes it hard to read. So on the one hand, you have some extra cards. So if you wanted to, can't find the other man and woman, but oh, here they are. here's the other woman. So you have like 2 different women. There's also 2 different men. There's a male and female rider. You know, for the gender diversity, it's nice. It's nice that there are some extra illustrations and you can switch out which type of birds do you want, or which type of tree, which type of snake. But other times when you can't tell, this is the other man. So there's the 2 men. Other times you can't tell what the card was supposed to be, male and female rider. You know, and you're like, wait, is that garden or is that bouquet? And I do think it is bouquet, but at first I called it garden until I saw the number 9 on it and was like, wait, that's not right. So until you have what the cards are supposed to be in the first place memorized, it can be really confusing, especially like, I guess this one must be lily. I'm not really a plant person. At first I could have thought clover, you know, which is similar in color, but not the shape of the leaves and everything. So that part I did find honestly a little bit confusing at first. But once you get used to what everything is, it's a good size. I do wish the words were on here to label what they are. I really do like the artwork, but for me it wasn't a good deck to first learn from. It probably would have been helped a lot just by simply having the name of what it was supposed to be, just so you can tell what you're looking at. But I think it's interesting that it has different options for several of the illustrations and not just for the man and woman. This is Celtic Lenormand. Okay, so next is the Rana George Lenormand, and it does not come with this big book, but this book was the first Lenormand book that I had. It's a big, extensive book with a huge write-up about each card, what it means in different situations, different card combinations. She has exercises to do, practice readings, very big, extensive book. Like, I think she may have been one of the first people to write a book in English. So this is her deck, and it does come with a little book of its own. So if you don't have her big book, it still has quite a bit of information in it. She's actually been reading for decades. There's like some gilding. And what's really neat about these ones is that they do sort of line up with each other when you lay them out. So the borders kind of carry over with each other. With the gilding and the way the borders fit together, I think they're really pretty. They are numbered, and they do have the little playing card insets. They are not labeled, and a lot of times you can still tell what it's supposed to be, but every once in a while it can be a little bit confusing. So far none of these have been confusing, or at least not anymore, but I think at first I was very confused and overwhelmed. They're like busy. Like if you look at the cute little Lenormand, this is always or almost like the opposite, you know, instead of just a really clean, simple design where you can easily tell what you're looking at. There's a lot going on here. So like with the mice, obviously you can tell that it's supposed to be mice, but there's a lot other than just a mouse in the picture. And she also designed several extra cards. So for the man, there's 2 options. For the woman, there's 2 options. And then at the end, you know, after the traditional 36, she designed like 4 more cards to express ideas that she wanted included in her deck that weren't in the traditional deck. Now, for me, I don't read the extra cards, so I just set those ones aside, but it's nice that there are multiple options for the man and woman card. And I think the really strong part about this deck is just how impressive it looks. Not when I mess it up like that, but when it's all laid out and the way the borders flow into each other is probably my favorite part of this one. But as a beginner deck, I did find it somewhat confusing. I don't know if it was just a problem that I was having that for some reason I'm not having now, or if I just learned it well enough that it's pretty clear to me what they're supposed to be, but it wasn't clear to me what they were supposed to be at first. But I guess it's not that hard to learn. I guess it's like medium, you know, it's not super hard to learn, but it's not super apparent right off the bat what everything is supposed to be, especially since there are some extra cards. I like the Rana George. I should use it more now that I know what they are supposed to represent. Then I think I can just lay them out and enjoy just the impressive way that they look next to each other. And I really enjoy her book. I guess this deck has sort of a special place just because of that too. There's like, the book is sort of like, I don't know, just the intro and everything, it gives me like the desire to read the deck. Like she talks about growing up reading the cards and everything, and it just has sort of like this romantic story that makes me want to use the cards and want to read the deck. So that part is really inspiring to me. The Shadowland Lenormand is by Monika Brodersky, and she also has a Shadowland Tarot. The cards have the same pattern on the card backs. The Lenormand cards are a little bit smaller, but they have the same design. So they would look really cute if you used them together. There is gilding on the edges. And these are another card that is similar to the cute little Lenormand in that the images themselves have a lot of white space, and they're really modern images. Now these are bigger, so they're not going to go 8 or 9 across and 4 or 5 deep. At least being able to sit in one place and read them rather than standing up and scanning the entire table. They're quite a bit longer than a playing card and a little bit wider. But they have sort of this like, not quite Halloween feel, but like a little bit of a Halloween feel. I just think that they are especially adorable. And again, since changing the imagery does not change the meaning of the cards, then once you learn what they mean, they're always going to mean that. These are very clearly labeled. They do not have playing card insets at all, but they're numbered and have the words very clearly on them. So like with the dog just has the standard dog meaning. You don't pay attention to the little boy, or this is actually a bug in a dog costume. Like that doesn't change the meaning of the card. So you can just enjoy the adorable illustrations. And I guess I like not just the modern art style, but I like so much white space on them, because I feel like when you have all of the cards laid out and you have a lot of white space, then you can read them more clearly than when there's like all these lush illustrations, which are beautiful on their own, but in a spread they can become busy pretty quickly. So I like this deck for that reason. Like this and the Dreaming Way are probably my two like very favorite, that if I only had one or two and those were the one or two, then I would be happy with that. Which I wish that I had known that before I bought so many. And again, that's why I like to do a video and just show all of the ones that I bought, what I thought were their strengths and weaknesses, because you don't have to buy all of them. You might see one and be like, wow, I would love to get that one and learn with it. And you don't need to have a stack of them that didn't work for you, when you could just see the one that would work for you and then just get that one. So the Art Nouveau Lenormand is absolutely gorgeous, and there are some reasons that it's not my favorite for a beginner. The images themselves are beautiful. There are no playing card insets. They are numbered. They are not labeled with what the card is, so I wrote with Sharpie. I don't always love when I've written with Sharpie on my cards. I mean, I like it when I'm doing it, but then later when I look back at it, I'm like, well, I kind of wish I hadn't written on my cards. I just wish it had said what the cards were called. What it is that a lot of them look like woman. So there's a card that's for a man and a card that's for a woman. But in this deck, because of the Art Nouveau style, this is a woman, this is a woman, stars could be a woman, bouquet, scythe, clover, they all have a picture of a woman, and they're very pretty, but it's not always clear, that this is a heart and not the picture of a woman, or this is a ring. So that is why I wrote on them when I was learning. So, now you can look back and say, well, she has a book, she has a letter. So the illustration does have what it's supposed to represent. But, when you first get it and you haven't learned anything yet, like here's the actual card of the woman, but there's so many that you're like, well, I got the woman, and the woman again. So that's one of the reasons that it's not my favorite for a beginner. Another thing is that it's quite big. So this is one of the very biggest. I have 3 that are this size. The very biggest ones are all the same size. And they're quite a bit bigger, so I can't just lay out all of the cards. But what I really like about this deck is just, they're beautiful. The pictures are so pretty. I really, really like the art style a lot. Since I did write on it, it makes it more usable to me. I think art-wise, it's pretty enough that I'm glad that I have it. And, if I'm only doing a small spread of 3 or 4 cards, 6 cards, 9 cards, 9 cards might be getting kind of big just because they're so long, but it's still not you know, if you're going to lay out 36 cards, these wouldn't be the ones that you want. So this is one of the decks that, you know, I realized right away I would be putting this to the side, learning with a smaller deck that was clearly labeled, and then coming back to this after I knew what I was doing. So Art Nouveau, very beautiful, but big. Okay, the Pagan Lenormand. I was so excited about this one because it's by Gina Pace, and I have the Pagan Tarot by Gina Pace. I have the Pagan Tarot in the mini. I had the older edition of the Pagan Tarot. I mean, it's not a super favorite, but it's a deck that I've liked for a long time, and I was so excited that she also had Lenormand cards, and I didn't know what I was looking for yet in a deck of Lenormand cards, so I thought that I would really like this deck. So right off the bat, they're huge. They're the same size as the Art Nouveau and the Lenormand Oracle, quite a bit bigger than a deck of playing cards. They do have the playing card insets. They're numbered. They're not labeled. So again, this is a deck that I wrote on with Sharpie, and I try to incorporate if I'm writing on it with Sharpie, I try to do it in a way that fits, but I just don't love doing that. But some of these cards, it is not clear at all what is going on. So there are these characters and they're in robes. So you have a man in a green robe, a woman in a blue robe, a man in a red robe, a woman in a yellow robe, and they are on several of these cards. So one of the things I liked about the Pagan Tarot is that it told a story of a character all the way through. So I guess that's what she's trying to do here by having the same characters. They have a story that carries through the cards, but it doesn't work with Lenormand the same way it does with tarot. So like here, it seems kind of weird. There's just, the child is like superimposed floating on the grass, and then there's a story going on. Here we have the fox. It's just some people sitting around a campfire, I guess with their Patronus or whatever. Same thing with the bear. They're like sitting around, and then, you know, I don't know, shape-shifting or envisioning an animal, but having these characters and having them reappear. So the stork, again, I mean, I don't know if this is their power animals and they each get a different one, but it's really distracting and unnecessary. Like, it has nothing to do with what the cards mean. It looks like each of them has a power animal, but like that has nothing to do with how you interpret dog. So the man who appears and his power animal is the dog, like whatever story is going on here has nothing to do with how you would interpret a dog in a spread. So this was really my biggest disappointment of any of the decks, because it just has these people over and over and they have nothing to do with anything. I do like the mice. I think this is probably one of the cutest cards, but it doesn't seem to fit. It doesn't belong with the rest of the deck almost. They're eating potato chips and a sandwich. There's soda here. I don't know what this has to do with anything. It's very cute. For heart, see, it looks like they're writing letters. So letter is also one of the options for what a card could be. The heart is kind of front and center, but when you have something where the card is heart, but they're writing letters, and letter is also one of the possible things a card could be, that can be confusing. This one just didn't work for me. Here are the characters that appear over and over. So you have 2 cards for man, and you also have 2 cards for woman, and they are the characters that appear throughout the deck. But this one, personally, I was really disappointed. It's too big. It's too distracting with all of these stories going on in the background that have literally nothing to do with the cards. And I mean, that is what I liked about the Pagan Tarot. Like, I liked that it had a story and that the story carried through all of the cards. But with these ones, it's just like, I don't know what they're even doing here. So this one, like, if I could just go back in time and have one of them that I didn't buy at all, it would sadly be the Pagan Lenormand. It didn't work for me as a beginner deck, and even now I've learned what the cards are and what they mean, but like, why are these people standing under a coffin? What are they doing on the ship? I don't even know what they're there for. And that narrative of having a character through the cards just didn't work the same way that it did in the Pagan Tarot. So I was really disappointed with this one. The next 2 decks actually have more in common with each other almost than they do with the other Lenormand decks. So one of them is the Maybe Lenormand by Ryan Edward, And the other one is the Gypsy Witch Fortune Telling playing cards. Kind of an unfortunate name because, most people consider Gypsy a slur now, and honestly at the time, they probably intended witch as a slur as well. This deck hasn't been around like post-Wicca. The whole name is unfortunate. But it's one of these decks that's been around for more than 100 years and is like an American version of the Lenormand. And the maybe Lenormand is a newer deck. But both of these have 52 cards instead of 36. And they have the Lenormand cards and then they have additions to that. So the maybe Lenormand, I did write on it and I did not use Sharpie. I think this was the first deck that I wrote on, and I just used whatever ink pen, and as it turns out that can smear and come off. I think on some of them I erased it with like a magic eraser. It left a mark. Looks like on several of these I did erase it with a magic eraser to see if I could get it back off, and it mostly comes off, but you can still see a little bit of it, and there is like just a smeary spot. I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but let me see. Don't write on the deck and then erase it with a magic eraser. I wanted to see if that works, and it's just not a great idea.
Yeah, if there's something there, like point out if there's something there.
I mean, the camera might not see it, but in person, somebody would see it. These ones are just a little narrower than a deck of playing cards. Kind of a thick cardstock feel. Some of these, like the fox and the bear, are a little bit difficult to tell what it's supposed to be. A lot of them, it's pretty clear what they are. So the clover, you're not going to get confused, but just a few things. Like I wouldn't have guessed whip for that. And like I said, the bear and the fox, maybe I wouldn't have known what that was. But you have the regular 36 Lenormand cards, and then for the rest of the deck of cards, there are things like pig, lion. You see this one where they're clasping hands. So for the Celtic, when I was like, the one that's supposed to be ring, it looks like they're clasping hands or something, because in some decks, there is a card where they're clasping hands, so that can be confusing. Here they have Bacchus. There's a cat, a medal, a sick bed. So it has like several other cards, and there's a broken mirror. They have the playing card inset, and it just fills out the entire deck that way. And a lot of these are traditional, and I say that because they also are from the Gypsy Witch fortune telling cards. A lot of them are the same, like the pig is also in that deck. So they don't have the same card correspondences necessarily, but it seems as though the artist did some research about other styles that had 52 cards and then chose which ones to include. So when he called this one the maybe Lenormand, because like maybe it's a Lenormand, maybe it's something different entirely. Not entirely, but a little bit different. So you can use it with just the 36 cards, or you can use the full deck. You could do it either way. Maybe Lenormand. I do wish it had been labeled. I prefer it if it's labeled. It's numbered and it has the playing cards, but I just prefer if it's labeled. So especially for learning, I guess the images are mostly clear. It's just some of them weren't entirely clear, and then I made a bad choice to write on it with something that wipes off, but not entirely. So that's on me. Most people probably aren't going to write on their cards. If you do, definitely use a permanent marker, because you're going to be sad if you write on it with something that isn't a permanent marker. So that's maybe Lenormand. And then the Gypsy Witch fortune telling cards. These ones have the nicest cardstock. Like they're so smooth, and I just love the way they shuffle. Like sometimes if I'm just watching, Netflix or something, I would just shuffle these the whole time. There are the jokers, which has instructions on how to use them. You can answer yes or no questions with the jokers. One thing that really sets this deck apart from the rest is that the playing card insets are in the upper left corner. So they're properly indexed like actual playing cards. Like you could literally hold them in your hand and play card games with them. I honestly wish, after seeing the way these are set up, that all of the cards that have the playing cards on them had them in the corner like that, so that you can hold them in the familiar way of playing cards and see how they're indexed. That is definitely, in my opinion, the correct place to put that. Now this deck, it has numbers, it has the playing cards, and it has pictures, but they do not correspond with the traditional Lenormand. So here, there's a clover. It should be number 2, but it's number 33. The rider should be number 1, but he's number 14. So if you're using the numbers, if you're using the playing cards, this is a totally different system. But if you're just using the symbols, you know, you have a tree, you have a house, you have a snake. They are the same symbols for 35 of the 36. So the one called the cross has been changed and it's called the shepherd. And then there are additional cards that aren't in the Lenormand to make it a 52 card deck like we use in a lot of playing card games in the United States, rather than a 36 card deck that's used for some European playing card games. The thing about this deck is that the artwork itself is not beautiful on its own, and the colors are just black, red, yellow is basically what the colors are. But I feel like when you lay them all out, like they have a grandness almost. Like if you were just to look at one, like the way you do with a tarot card, you pick up one card and you look at it, it's so pretty, and you meditate on the beautiful image. You're not going to do that with this. Like, this is not the most beautiful fox you've ever seen or the most beautiful bear. I'm not even convinced that looks very much like a fox or a bear. But when you lay the whole spread out, there's just something so like charming almost. I don't know. They have like a history in American fortune telling. Like, I was reading a blog post on Mary Greer's blog, and she had some imagery from newspapers. They would have cards like this, and you could cut them out and make your own deck from the newspaper. And they looked very much like this. So it's just a very traditional American style of fortune-telling deck that, in my opinion, looks its best spread out like this rather than one card at a time, where it's not that pretty, it's not that impressive, but laid out like this, like you feel like now you're getting a reading when you see all of these laid out like this. This one is Gypsy Witch fortune-telling playing cards. So that is the last deck in my collection. That is legitimately too many decks. So we have some that are not as good for beginners, but they're good decks. We have some that I just didn't like at all. We have some that I like a lot. There are just way too many. I don't know why I overwhelm myself. If I'm going to learn something, like, why don't I just buy one and then learn with it? I don't have to buy every deck that they make.
Yes, you do.
It seems as though I do. But, I mean, a solid recommendation if you were learning. I mean, either the Grand Tableau or the Old Style Lenormand is a solid deck to learn with that is going to do everything you wanted to do. A lot of the decks are pretty. There's nothing wrong with having more than one deck of cards. At least I don't think there is. But you don't have to overwhelm yourself with literally every deck that exists, and now you were going to learn it, but you're so overwhelmed with all of these things. Don't overwhelm yourself. Get something simple. This one has a book, it has clear illustrations, choose that. Or if you like the more traditional artwork, choose that, and then save the other ones for later after you've learned, when you can just pull it out and not wonder, like, what is this supposed to illustrate? Because it's going to be really clear to you after you've already learned what all the cards are. That is my entire Lenormand collection and some suggestions of what you could start with if you're a beginner. And that's all I've got for you today. So I will see you next time. Thank you.
Like and subscribe. Or this way, actually.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of my videos, be sure to subscribe to my channel and ring that bell for notifications. I post new videos every Wednesday.